You had have told me that breathing and meditation would have gotten me over the anger of the death of my mother and got me sober, I would have said you were nuts. But it did. In any situation, I don't want a person to feel completely helpless. There are things we could take responsibility for, even if someone else is to blame.
I was in one of those relationships.
Yes.
When I think back on it now, it's like, well, it was my external reality was a reflection of my own relationship with myself. I think with addiction, there's this feeling of I suffer so much when I'm not doing whatever it is that destructive behavior that I'm going to do that so I don't feel. And I think we're in a society that trains us for that. It's like, oh, you don't want to feel? Just look at your phone. Oh, you don't want to feel? Like, just watch a show.
There's always thoughts that are stuck in my head that I wish they would go away, but they don't. But they're just thoughts, and they're not me.
Hello, I'm Emma Seppala. I'm a psychologist, a research scientist, and a best-selling author. I work at the Yale School of Management and have the pleasure of leading this podcast on sovereignty, the science of sovereignty. What does it mean? You know, we live in this time and age where things are so chaotic. And really, the one thing we can hold on to is our inner sovereignty, our ability to find that peace, that calm, and also that empowerment, no matter what's going on. Every 2 weeks, I talk to really inspiring people about how we can develop more inner sovereignty and how we can thrive even in the most challenging of times. Scott Kaufman is a well-known psychologist, best-selling author, coach. He is also a really good friend of mine. We've known each other for over 20 years. And he is really interested in helping people gain that inner mastery, freedom, so that they can live their best lives. And as you'll see, he is full of amazing advice, and he's also really, really fun to listen to, as is Mark Fry, another close friend of mine who has developed so much inner sovereignty after going through many years of both meditation and recovery, as well as radical honesty with himself and his relationships. And he now coaches men on how to do the same. He's really an inspiring person, also really fun. So let's get started.
So Scott and Mark, two of my favorite humans. There's so much I learn every time I talk to both of you. I just feel like you're so authentic, and you always, really just share what's real. And I think right now we don't really have time for conversations that aren't real. That's what we all need. So, Mark, I interviewed you for my book Sovereign, and I just love your story, and I would love to get us kicked off with that because I think that can really lead into. So Scott, you and I have been talking a little bit offline about this idea of, there's so much being talked about trauma, and everyone's a victim of something, and gosh, even that phrasing that I just used, probably people would be upset about. So let's, anyways.
Well,
So
let's not talk and worry about if we're going to upset people. Let's just
that's
speak
right.
our truth.
Yeah. So, I think we live in a world where it's like everyone feels they have trauma, and maybe they do, but I often think that, if sometimes that can keep us in that disempowered place to identify with that. It keeps us from our sovereignty that way. So anyway, I'd love to hear your perspective. I know you've written a new book and you address this topic, and I love your perspective. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks. This is the first opportunity I've had in the world to express this. So thank you. Yeah, I think that one of the things that you get to be alive is you get to be alive, but you also it comes with a price of admission is that you're going to have suffering. The Buddha said that a long time ago. In a lot of ways, it's funny. I'm really the main thesis of my book is we just need to return to Buddhism way of thinking. Like life is suffering. But there's a whole kind of mentality cropping up I see everywhere where people think they're really uniquely special because they're suffering, and they have this kind of attitude of like, well, no one can understand, what the suffering I'm going through, and because I'm suffering, I therefore deserve all sort of special resources and things, and it really disconnects us from others, that kind of mentality, and it also disconnects us from ourselves, which is the sovereignty part that we can kind of bring in there. I mean, we really get such a disconnection from ourselves when we're only looking outward to blame others for things that we're not happy about within ourselves.
This is beautiful what you just shared. It actually goes right along with Mark's story. So, Mark, I don't know if you heard that last bit that Scott was sharing about that, everybody sort of has aspects of suffering, but it's so easy to blame the outside world for that. And Mark, your story fits so nicely. If you wouldn't mind sharing it.
I really apologize.
Nope.
So yeah, so basically, honestly, this is my life's work was just summarized by what just happened, because I've been waiting to do this for so long and put so much effort in, woke up early, blah, blah, blah. And then the camera just stopped working. And I've probably got $6,000 of equipment around me. And I used to be so pissed off all the time. So there's two high water marks in my life. My mom died when I was a kid, and I was just like pissed. I was just angry all the time that she was dead. And people would say things and whatever. It didn't mean anything to me. And then my dad had a bunch of cash, so he sent me to talk to all the people you talk to, and it didn't mean anything to me. It like literally was like, whatever you're saying doesn't bring my mom back. So I just drank. Nothing else mattered. And partying, having friends, all that stuff, saw the world. And then at some point I was like, this isn't good. Like my underlying emotion is anger. I get just drunk to, hide that. And then I met Sri Ravi Shankar in January of 2002. And then I kind of went on these two different paths of partying and meditating. And luckily I was able to stick with the meditation. And then I went to the Waldorf Astoria in New York City a year after I started meditating, and a wonderful man named Bill Herman asked me on a camera, on an interview, he's like, what happened? Like, what did you get from the breathing? And I said, if you had have told me that breathing and meditation would have gotten me over the anger of the death of my mother and got me sober, I would have said you were nuts. But it did. And I've been doing it every day since for 22 years, been teaching it for 19 years. And I feel so blessed to do it. And then the other one was when I was 2019, when I was, I met who I can, I'm a mentor of mine, and I hadn't yet done the 12 steps. And he said, look, man, like, I don't mean to be a jerk, but you seem like you got a lot of stuff you got to work on. And then I realized, like, just because I've been teaching meditation, teaching happiness and all this stuff didn't mean I was living it. And then I started to do the 12 steps in 2019. And that's when really, really I was able to start living some of the stuff and realizing how much effort I had to put in, how much work I had to put in. It is, yeah, moms die all the time, and that's really sad. And living there forever is, how many times do I want to live November 8th, 1992 over again, over and over and over again, and ruining some cashier's day because my mom died 37 or whatever, 25 years ago. And so then I started to, that was really when it started happening, taking full responsibility for my life in 2019, stop blaming other people, just accepting that, I'm human. I have tons of faults. That's not good or bad. It's just the way I am. And I get angry sometimes. That's fine. As long as I'm not lashing out at people and not taking that out on other people, and allow myself to feel the emotions. I used to think it was bad to be angry. Like if I come out in the parking lot and someone's hit my car, I'm going to be angry. But I don't have to yell at anyone, to scream at anyone, to throw anything. So yeah, that's kind of the two high water marks of my life story of like where I first was like, life doesn't matter. And then I found like meditation when I found life did matter. And then when 2019, just before the pandemic, like responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, speech, and actions, and not blaming other people for any of that, just being like, okay, this is it. This is me. This is what I got to deal with. And I have a ton of gifts and I have a ton of faults, and just going forward as best I can.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, this idea of just sort of radical responsibility for how I'm feeling and the sort of non-judgmental attitude towards it, and at the same time not blaming the world. I mean, that's a huge shift. Mark, you're very colorful in your language when you express to me how that 2019 experience went. Do you want to go a little bit more into detail of like?
I mean, it's pretty funny. I mean, am I allowed to swear? Am I allowed to cuss?
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, so the guy we're really close. He's 80 years old. I'm 46. It's hilarious. Like, I feel like I'm talking to my future self when I talk to him. And he said, let's go to a meeting. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to go to a damn meeting. Like, the AA meetings are so annoying. Like, this is what I was thinking at the time. Because people just tell war stories. Oh, I was this, I was that, I was this. I didn't want to hear any of that. Like, it's just like, yeah, I jumped off a 9-story building. I jumped off a 10-story building. I jumped off a 11-story building. I owned the building. I burned it, just like just gets pretty crazy. So I went to this meeting down in, I don't know where I was, somewhere in Southern California. And this guy didn't know who I was. There was 50 people there. And there's like been these aha moments in my life. And this guy just looked at me and said, if you've been sober for 16 years and haven't done the 12 steps, you're probably an asshole. And it just hit my heart so deeply. And I was like, whoa. And then I just started looking at my life, and I just had been blaming everybody for everything. And like my ex-wife or my mom or my dad or my brothers or my guru or whoever, just not me. And then when I started going into it and started doing the 12 steps, it was like, oh yeah, like the funniest thing I ever said, I think about it was, just because you have a guru doesn't mean you're not an asshole. I think that was like the culmination of my work there. And like, just being guru adjacent doesn't mean you live the knowledge. And I read, and so I just feel so blessed, honestly, since that time, because I don't blame anybody anymore. I don't get angry. I mean, I get angry, but like, I'm not blaming other people for it. And and not just that, like, being aware of my beliefs and where thought comes from and how society has such an impact on these things, and generationally, like, like my DNA, and, not beating myself up, because all I knew as a little boy was like, every Friday and Saturday night at my house, there was 50 people there drunk from the age of 4. So what else would I know? And giving myself patience. The biggest thing, I guess, is patience and kindness and grace. Those are the biggest things that I've learned, is patience, kindness, and grace over the years now, is with everybody. Everybody has so many. It's difficult to be a human. I think the human experience is difficult. And then we have all these ways with our phones and all the media apps and everything of like, that person has it better than me, then person has it better than me. And I am very open, and I am very vulnerable, and I'm very, very honest. And because of that, I hear, and most of my friends are upper middle class, and like, their cars are nicer and their houses are bigger, but they still got tons of problems. And the richer it seems you are, the worse it seems you sleep. Seems what I've learned as I talk to my friends, as I go up that's one. And then a lot of people just worry about their children. Everybody has stuff. The whole point is everybody has stuff, and they're not bad people. They're just, everyone has stuff. And that's why I think patience and kindness is the biggest thing I try to do now with the world and myself. And then know that it's like a continuous learning experience, and not stopping learning. Like, don't rest on that's what I did. I thought getting sober was enough. I thought 2002 or 2004 I got sober. 2003 I got sober, then I'm good. Like, I'm done. I don't have to do any more work. And I was a little bit off on that. I had a lot more work to do. I had a lot more learning to do. And I think I've done it, and I've committed to it, and I'm really proud to say that I've taken that responsibility on, to learn or unlearn really most things. And try to be patient and kind. That's really what I'm attempting to do now, after 2019's realization of that AA meeting, that maybe I was a bit of a jerk.
Well, patience and kindness and grace, both with the outside world and with your own self. That is a really beautiful secret to that sovereignty of like, I'm not going to blame the outside world and just further increase my anger. And I was not going to blame myself for my anger. Like, it's
Yes.
normal. I'm human, and that's a beautiful way of navigating life, with sovereignty
Yes.
and awareness and peace of mind also. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Scott, did you want to respond to that? Or
No, I just love listening to Mark.
I know, right? I do too. And Scott, you've now written a whole new book on related to this topic, right? And
Yeah.
I love to hear a little bit about like what led you to writing that, and you know
Probably.
what one of the bigger takeaways you have for your readers, for everyone.
Well, probably my whole life prepared me for this topic that I'm writing about in my new book. As a kid, there were very low expectations on me. I had an auditory learning disability, and so I think people kind of thought I was really stupid. And there was a moment where a special ed teacher, took me aside and said, "What are you still doing here? You know, in ninth grade?" And she saw greater potential in me, and I realized in my own head, I was like, "Yeah, what am I still doing here?" You know, and I just realized that I had been in this kind of prison in my own head. You know, like obviously the school system, you know, put me in special ed, but I never dawned on me, and I never realized that I could actually take myself out of special ed. And actually, it had never dawned on any special ed student in the history of our school system that they could do it too. So I was the first ever person to break out of special ed himself.
So amazing.
I just
Talk
said,
about sovereignty.
what do you say?
Talk about sovereignty.
Yes, yes. And yeah, I think we live our lives a lot in this learned helplessness state. You know, we think we're stuck with a certain partner, or we think we're stuck in a cult, or we think we're stuck in so many ways in life. In our job, we're stuck in our job, or you know, and this kind of program. I've developed this self-actualization coaching program where we try to help people really see greater possibilities for their lives and really get in touch with who they really truly are. This is the sovereignty thing I love, you know, is getting in touch with your real, let's put it this way, your most alive, creative, unique center of being, and really get in touch with that. And if you lead from that, as opposed to leading from pointing the finger at everyone else for why you haven't developed it, you know, but you actually lead from a place of, oh, let me get in touch with it and do what I can to develop it. You lead from a completely different energy in the world, and people are going to be much more the universe kind of will open up to you in a really beautiful way. It sounds a little woo woo. It sounds a little woo woo, but you got to trust the universe at some point. You
Yeah.
know, stop throwing rocks at the universe, and at some point, trust it and trust yourself. And I think beautiful things. Just there's so many examples, and I have examples in the book of what happens when you really do that and you really lead from a place of empowerment,
I love,
self-empowerment. Yeah.
yeah, self-empowerment. Do you have a personal example?
Well, just with the special ed thing, yeah,
Yes.
that's
Oh,
a
for sure.
big example. And I took myself out and I signed up for all the classes I wasn't supposed to sign up for, all the honors classes, and I won't say I did great and everything, but I really learned a lot about myself and some things I did do pretty good at, and wasn't even supposed to go to college, and I discovered that I loved learning. It's so interesting what you can really discover about yourself when you listen to yourself as opposed to listen to what other people's perceptions of you are.
Hmm.
And I think just most of us go through life, and I will say most of us go through life just kind of like taking at face value other people's perceptions of us. And
Yes.
I just want to argue that we should not take that at face value. Sometimes people are just damn wrong. You know, like sometimes we're really not truly seen. And also that's why I also say hold on to those friends who do make you feel truly seen, like you, Emma. Um, you make me feel truly seen. And I have a couple people in my life that I feel that way about, and I think you need to really treat those people as sacred because I don't think most people are truly seeing you. Most people are projecting their own insecurities onto you, and you're triggering them. You're triggering, and it's not your fault. They need to do some work.
Well, it's so funny. Yes. And I mean, what I see in both of you is this deep sort of honesty with yourself, and then this ease of just showing up as yourself. And yeah, Mark.
I just like to add, I like Scott, what you just said was amazing. Is that I thought I was being honest. That's one of the things that I'm trying to tell people. Like I really thought I was being honest. You know what I mean? Like I really, really did. And I just want to like for people that are listening to this, like that it's the hardest thing. Like how do you tell someone that they have to do work? How do you tell someone that they have to listen to themselves when they actually think they are? Like, you know, these words like radical acceptance and all these things you hear and these buzzwords, and people can say like, I have a gratitude journal and that, but you're like, yeah, but you're not doing, you're not doing you can tell because whenever you go anywhere, it's so negative. And I contemplate this. This isn't me making a point of like, it's like, how would I ever tell my old self until 2019, like for all those years, like maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's not them. And that's something I'm perpetually asking myself, because when I'm talking to people and they're telling me that I have addictions, I have this, I have that, I have this, and it's like, well, have you ever thought maybe it's not anybody else? But it's really hard to say that to someone and have them have it land, and I'm not just think, oh, whatever. You know what you're talking about. To point that out, because it's something I think about all the time, all of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tricky.
Go on, Scott.
It's tricky. There's like I completely agree with what you said, and there's also a balance we need to take from a third eye perspective in blame and responsibility are two fascinating topics. Sometimes, like for instance, if let's say you're in a relationship with an abusive partner, I don't want to say to the partner to the person who's being abused, maybe it's you, like that's like kind of a dickish thing to say. Like if someone's legitimately being abused. But I think that we need to recognize there's a difference between blame and responsibility. Okay, so we can blame, legitimately, if someone is really being abusive, like that person needs to take responsibility for their abuse. And then what is the responsibility the other person can take? Well, I think there are certain responsibilities that the person can take to do what they can to have greater self-care, to have greater distance from the other person, to seek resources and help. So in any situation, I don't want a person to feel completely helpless, is the point I'm trying to make here. There are things we could take responsibility for, even if someone else is to blame. Does that make sense?
It
Yeah.
makes sense, Scott, because I was in one of those relationships.
Yes.
And I think back on it and I think, wow, there were so many instances. Why didn't I go to the cops? Why didn't I leave? Like, and in those moments when I think back on it now, it's like, well, it was my external reality was a reflection of my own relationship with myself, you
Wow.
know, and and that
Whew. That's
self
deep.
yeah, that self-loathing was being reflected, and therefore I was accepting it. And I was reeling in the same thing, and it wasn't until later, after that relationship ended, and then I started realizing, my next relationships were much better. Actually, my only of the relationship, my husband currently, I was like, wow, this person is kind and respectful. But and I also realized in my work relationships, because in my work relationships, I was also seeing a reflection of that self-loathing. And I noticed I was starting to put down boundaries and things like that. And now it's not an issue for me anymore, but it was definitely, to your point, I had responsibility to take. So of course did my then partner. But again, you can't make someone else do that, right? You can only take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, and it's also part of being an adult. We all have within us the capacity to learn how to set proper boundaries, how to learn emotional regulation skills, how to learn mindfulness. Like to me, that is the most empowering thing in the world, what I just said. Yet there are certain circles that would find what I just said as incredibly something other than empowering. I don't know what they would say, but I could see there are certain communities would be like, oh, no, I think that we need a more empowering society that treats everyone, regardless of where they came from, as capable of learning the important life skills that allow you to live the life you truly want to live. And it's a shame that that statement has become controversial in our climate today.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I often think about, so two things, this, how you educate kids for that, but also how you educate adults. And I know both of you are in the business of educating adults on these things. So, I mean, from the child perspective, I often think, how can we raise children so that they have this sense of, this is who I am. I celebrate who I am. I take responsibility when I'm not kind, right? Obviously, but let me shine as who I am, even if that's a little different or a little quirky, because those are the gifts we bring, right? Um, and um, and for a child to grow up with that honoring of self, so they can flourish into their full potential. And then, so actually, Mark, I know you teach kids as well, but I know Mark also is leading men's groups to actually bring them to this greater place of sovereignty.
Wow.
And then Scott, you also coach on these things to your coaching clients and your community that you have. So would love thoughts and maybe some tips and tricks for people, some things that to take away on some things they can do to access that greater level of sovereignty.
Wow, Mark, you host men's groups?
Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I've done it. I'm doing it.
So
Pardon me.
important. So important. It's so important. There's so much research showing that, especially like
Hmm.
boys, they are not privileged. Young boys have the highest rates of
Hmm.
suicide. Like just so many. There's so many things that boys and young men are facing in terms of loneliness that our society is ignoring. So I'm just so happy that you do
Yeah,
that.
it. So tomorrow night actually is we're doing something really cool. Two professors of psychology and myself are putting on a mini men's retreat at a local community college. It's a beautiful location in Halifax. Well, it's in Dartmouth, actually, looking at Halifax. If anybody knows actually the location, they'll get upset if I said it's in Halifax. Um, and we're having a mini men's retreat, and I'm going to be doing body breath work, meditation, and yoga. But what I'm finding is that it's really just simple little things I'm doing to get you be able to deal with certain situations. So the biggest one I've been doing the last 7 weeks, just 12 weeks, is your feet. Just being able, because I was trying to figure out a way that people could be in a meeting or somewhere where they're uncomfortable and like kind of check in with themselves. So we'll work on like just like one tip would be just being aware of your feet. Like, are you on the front of your feet, the back of your feet, the sides of your feet? Just getting into your feet. So a friend of mine he's making a pretty big decision about a job right now. He's in Singapore, doing a presentation. He's about to present. I mean, it's a big, big job that they're offering him. And he just said, I just sat there and checked in with my feet to make sure before I stood up, I was okay. So that really helped. And the two professors are going to talk about identity to start off with, like, what is your identity? And then relating that to the holidays. And then the other professor is going to be talking about difficult situations. And when you're in with people that are going to be bothering you. So we're doing that tomorrow night. And we've got 15 guys signed up for it right now, which is really exciting. And the main thing is just being able to get together and just kind of be together. And we have dinner together once a month. And a lot of it is chit chatting. And then we have a conversation, like a topic conversation where we'll talk about acceptance or responsibility, love, just different themes that people are actually attempting to implement in their life. And one person's a Christian mystic, and one person's a Buddhist, and one person's atheist, and everyone has their different takes on it. So it's really fun to hear the chats, but it's just nice to get together and have a group of people you can talk to and kind of express those thoughts that are like, like prayer. We talked about prayer one night was a big one. How do you pray? Like if you're not praying to Santa Claus, because it's a Roman Catholic Christian Eastern Canadian. I grew up like praying to Santa Claus. Give me this. Don't get, like, I do this. Give me this. That's what I knew God to be. And now, we were talking about God being the space in between spaces. That's like where you're just being with whatever is there. And so we had a huge conversation one night about prayer. Like, how do you actually pray? So that's, it's really beautiful stuff. And so it's nice to find those groups. It's nice to be in those groups. It's nice to host those groups. Yeah. And I'm doing coaching with men. That's really been great the last couple months. And, but the tip is just, I would say, check on your feet. It's a good one. I do it all the time now, actually, because no one knows you're doing it. And you can just kind of get a little grounded. And because usually if you're on the front of your feet, you're like really anxious about what's about to happen. And the back of your feet, you want to leave. And on the sides and the side to side is usually like your mind vacillating. And if you can get them centered, usually it centers your body, your mind, and then you can kind of be a little bit more present. But that doesn't mean that situation's going to be better, but you'll be better in the situation.
I love that, Mark. I love that. Yeah. And sometimes I'll just tell myself if I'm about to walk into something challenging, just like, okay, let my high, like higher self or whatever it is, you like work through me, like just work through me in this moment. Let the right words come out and let me be of service, or let things come out so for the best for both people involved. Like if I'm entering a difficult conversation. Um, I don't know. What about you, Scott?
Oh, well, I love that. I'm going to take tips from both of you. I'm going to
I
call
saw
my
you checking in on your feet.
yeah, I'm going to call on my higher self while my feet are back. Um, from now on, combine both of your goodies. Um, no, I'm learning a lot from you guys. I do these. What are we talking about? Actually, what's the topic? What's the topic? I just love listening to you guys.
Just, some tips for people who are trying to gain
Tips.
that sovereignty in those moments and
Yeah, it's interesting because so I have different sections of my new book on don't be a victim to various things, like don't be a victim to your past. I have one
yes.
chapter called don't be a victim to your emotions. And I think
Mm,
that we think that like we have to take our emotional life at face value,
yes.
that we have to be like oh, I'm anxious, now I'm a victim to my anxiousness. And I just kind of want us to think differently about that. And I think meditation does help a lot with that. And it's helped me personally a lot with that. I kind of create a separation between my thoughts and my emotions and whatever William James called the witnessing self.
Yes.
But I think just even having the profound realization that you can feel a certain way and act a different way, you have that freedom, like is like profound to a lot of people. It's,
Yes.
I mean, I look around today and I'm like, did anyone get that memo? Like, just because like you're righteous indignation feeling, that someone disagrees with you. Like that doesn't mean that you need to act on that feeling. You're allowed to pause and get curious about someone else's life who might be very different from yours. But I feel like people did not get that memo these days.
That's hilarious, Scott. And it is so, so powerful. This idea of like, what's the big deal about my feelings, right? And I feel like myself, I've been on that journey for many years of trying to always be like, okay, those are just feelings. They're just emotions. Like, why do they don't have to control you, like you're
They're not
saying.
facts.
They're not facts. And sometimes they're not even yours, you know? Sometimes you're fine and someone walks in and they're anxious and then you're anxious and you're like, I'm anxious. Like, no, I'm not anxious. I'm like feeling that person, guys. That guy's anxiety. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah, I know more than you realize how what you mean. Totally.
But that is so powerful. You don't have to be a victim of your emotions. I mean, just that as a mantra is powerful.
Yeah, we really do kind of walk around as though we're victims of that. So, I guess the point I wanted to making in this book as well is you don't only just act like a victim to the external world, but we often, create mental prisons, and then we create our mental prisons, then we act as though we're victims to them. You created it, like like people who create learned helplessness or people who create learned what's it called? Self-handicapping. A lot of people will.
Scott, can I ask a
Um,
question?
yes. Oh,
How do
yes, of
you
course.
even get them to realize they've done that?
With my coaching practice, I spend so much time with my clients pointing out these patterns, and they're like, "Oh, wow." Like I had a client recently. Um, every time she would start with confidence, but then she would trail off and never end on a definitive note. And I was like, why are all your cadences like reflective of all your actions as well in the real world? Like you don't ever follow through on anything. And by the way, this might sound like tough love, but like I think there's nothing more empowering than what I call honest love. You know, I don't believe in tough love, and I also don't believe in coddling. I think there's a middle way, which is what I talk about in my book. I call it honest love, which is like, as long as you establish first with a person that you really have their best interests at heart, like bringing up patterns that you notice that you think might be pulling them back. We shouldn't be scared to do that with our friends, you know?
That is so true, Scott. It's so true and so powerful. I had an example come where I was in a group of people for a week and we were doing this workshop type thing and one of the gentlemen said, I think we had to self-reflect or something, and he said, I feel like I'm annoying. And the interesting thing is, I had felt he was annoying all week, but there was no reason for him to be annoying. Was the most adorable. He was like the most elderly gentleman in our group, and he was adorable. And I was like, why am I annoyed by this person? Like, he's not objectively annoying. And then when we were all, so I think the exercise was to self-reflect. I can't remember the exact, words, what we were supposed to do, but he said, I feel like I'm annoying. And I was like, oh my gosh, he is projecting that, and therefore that I'm feeling that.
He's so self-conscious that he's annoying that he became annoying. It's so true. And you see this all the time with like, well, I don't know if we want to go here, but like, shy guys who approach women, right? That they think they're cute or whatever. It's like they if they actually just showed up. This is my whole dating coach, persona coming out right now. But like, if you just showed up without the insecurity of like, oh my God, am I going to come across as creepy? Am I going to come? If you approach anyone, we can just generalize. It doesn't have to be about men approaching women, but we can generalize it to any situation. If you have so much social anxiety that like, oh my God, am I going to come across as creepy? I guarantee you'll come across as creepy. Like I will predict with 99% accuracy that if you're terrified that you're going to come across as creepy, you will come across as creepy.
Yeah, no, but it's so interesting how, like you were talking earlier about this idea of projection, right?
Yeah.
And so, going back to what you both have been saying, having that awareness and doing the internal work of being like, okay, these are my emotions or these are my perceptions of myself. They don't have to control me and they're not necessarily the truth. And they're probably not the truth. They're just what's happening right now in this instant, and it's going to change. And yeah, it's so true. Oh, we need more of your dating advice, Scotty.
I don't know, Mark. What do you think of my dating advice?
I mean, I think that, I mean, I think that it's very
It's
simple. If you
approach
just say
advice.
something to someone, it's pretty easy. But when you're saying that, all I think of is, I think in narrative so much of like, so much of television shows us that you're supposed to be nervous, and so much of all the coming of age movies are you're supposed to be nervous. And this is what I learned, and I'm being very sincere when I say this, because I know there's so much behind what you're saying, but like I didn't realize that I acted so many different ways. Like I would go into situations. I mean, I could tell hilarious stories about me asking girls out. The girl I'm dating currently, I asked her out twice in my 20s and 30s, and she said no both times. So it's quite funny, actually. But I didn't know, like, oh, I played this role. I'm playing this role. I'm playing this role. And then, like, you know, yeah, dating advice. Yeah, just ask the person out. But that's easier said than done if you're dealing with, like, you haven't had any awareness, and then you hear this, you're like, oh, I'll just go. Which you actually could do, but you'd probably get so caught up in all the things you believe on the walk over, or that calling someone that you almost have like start sweating, and you have all these like hyperventilation and all these things.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it can be terrifying, but then I feel like we add on additional layers of
Yeah,
self-sabotage.
for sure,
Yes.
for sure.
And we do that. We all do that. And I don't, and I think just becoming aware and mindful of your own self-sabotage patterns is like revolutionary to people's
So
lives.
Scott, I'm going to ask you a question. I hope it's okay, Emma, but I'm really intrigued by what you're saying.
You can ask me
So I
anything.
get a lot of people that call me because they're addicts, and I mean a lot, like once a month. So I'll use 2 examples of the last month, like 3 examples. A friend of mine can't get sober, knows it's self-sabotage, can't get sober. And then recently he's got like 80 or 90 days. And then these 2 other guys, I'm texting with them, but they're not, they're 15, 16, 17 years trying to get sober. And they don't even return my texts for like 2, 3 weeks at a time. So what about those? Like they're self-sabotage, and they've been to rehab like one I think he goes every year. It's like a vacation for him. Like, what do you say to those people? And I'm genuinely asking because I'd love to know your perspective on that. When they are self-sabotaging, but they can't fix it.
I have so many questions about, as a start, like if I was doing a coaching session with that person, there are a lot of questions I would ask that called powerful coaching questions. For instance, what I want to know is, well, in what ways is your life as an addict to, is it alcohol?
It's
Is that what we're
usually
talking
alcohol.
about?
Usually it's
Okay.
alcohol, drugs, and prostitutes. Usually those are the 3 big things that people need to do.
Okay. Oh, okay. Do those three go
Usually in
together?
the phone calls that
Are
I
they
get, those are the three things.
So, yeah, the way see it's so the way I think about this, look, is maybe not how everyone thinks about this kind of stuff. So I want to just say that very clearly. I'm a very open-minded, like non-judgmental. And I think that if we just listen to people with unconditional positive regard and really have them with unconditional positive regard talk to us about what needs is that serving for you and are there any other alternatives? I suspect this guy does not feel like there are any other alternatives to get the needs that he wants and to just listen to that and hear that out and then also brainstorm maybe what are some other things that could satisfy those needs, but in a non-judgmental
Hmm.
way. Like you can tell the way I'm talking, just how open I am and non-judgmental I am, and that's just what I believe that's we need more of that in the world, quite frankly, because we are so quick to shame people for their own lifestyle.
So the people that are calling me are like wrestling with a demon, but a demon that has 9 bodies and 9 arms, and like they don't. This is not enjoyable.
I get it. I
Maybe,
get it.
maybe it is. I don't know, but it's certainly like loss of job, loss of home, loss of spouse, loss of bodily functions. It doesn't
Yeah,
seem like that's what
it's
they
ruining
want
their
to
life.
have in their lives.
It's ruining.
And then I've never met someone with a real issue with alcohol because alcohol is my thing that I talk to people about mainly. I use drugs to mask booze, and I wasn't into sex workers, so that's not my stuff. But booze, but
Now you're
booze
saying
was, and yeah, I don't know any of them. Like one guy in Quebec, he tries to take a pill and has like 2 or 3 drinks to like that's kind of like a version of like cutting your stomach in half so that you don't gain weight. He doesn't seem to, he always ends up every, 9 or 10 or 12 weeks, doing something that's embarrassing his wife or his children or his. So I don't know anyone that's been able to moderate it. I'm not saying that's not possible, but like the people that I'm dealing with are like, they don't want to be drunk anymore, but they don't know what else to do. And as far, I mean, I know it's escapism. I think that's very obvious. But it's not just, and the one thing is like, it's not just alcohol. Like people do it with, I mean, phones are the biggest thing people are addicted to right now. Shopping's a big one too, like Black Friday into Christmas, but people are okay with that. Food,
Food.
huge. But booze is like, as a little kid, they probably liked it, gave them that sense of confidence and whatever, escape. And then, usually it's acceptable in your late teens, early 20s, and then transition to like wine's okay. And then, but not really getting wasted. But these guys are getting wasted and normally by themselves, right? It's isolating as well. They don't go, and if they do go out, people don't want to be with them. So I genuinely want to know what to say to these guys because they call me at their wits' end, like it's like, what do I do? And I've never heard anyone that's had an issue that like been able to moderate it. It always seems to go like they balance, 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 and then boom, and it's so bad. And every boom is worse. Like every fall is worse than the last fall. And it's kind of like, what are you
Totally.
doing? But you know,
I see that and I
yeah.
acknowledge that. I think maybe Emma has some great maybe techniques that can help these individuals, but I've always been really eye-opening about research showing that addicts, if you keep increasing the distance between their addiction and not having the stimulus, like really like abstaining from the stimulus, the farther out you get, the farther away that old self seems from you. And so that's a little bit of a clunky way of making of saying what I want to say, but I think the reverse is also true. So when you're in it, it seems like you can't change. It seems like all hope is lost, and that it's like, man, I've gone 16 years. There's no hope for me. And what I want to impress upon these individuals is that like hope is you can change until the day you die. And they literally like Roy Baumeister has done these studies where like literally like the graph is so striking. Like if you go 2-3 years out from abstaining from it, you start to think, oh, like I was ever addicted to this, like that's so far from your
Hmm.
identity anymore. And if you ask the person while they're addicted, like, will you ever get to a point in your life where this doesn't feel like you need this? They'll be like, I give up. There's no hope. Like I need. So that's one thing I want to say is like, look at all these examples of people who have gone through the really tough, difficult period of abstaining, and look at what is possible on the other side. You gotta trust the universe. That yeah. So that's one thing, and the other thing I'll say is I've seen some really radical changes in people through mindfulness practices where they just meditate on their urges without trying to change the urge. But every time they get the urge, before they use, they immediately go to the cushion and just like completely accept that the urge is there and just practice the art of being with the urge, not trying to inhibit the urge. And I've heard some really amazing transformational stories of people who've done that regularly, where they get to the point where they've trained themselves so much to insert that mindful pause that they're able now to better regulate those urges. So those are just two things I wanted to say. But Emma, does that resonate at all with the research you've done?
Well, it totally resonates. Also, it's Mark's story, I think. You've
Oh yes,
abstained
that's
and
true.
then meditated, so it's a
True, that's
beautiful
true.
example of that. And yes, and I know we're short on time, but I just from my own perspective, I had an eating disorder in college where I would eat every time I felt down, um, and I remember then going to my first meditation experience ever, which was horrendous, and I hated it. It was like an hour of staring at the floor. It was a very strict Korean Buddhist session, and not like fun and games for an 18-year-old. And when I came out of that session, I was like, I'm never doing that again. And then the next day, I was feeling down, and there was food in some gross pizza or something in my dorm room, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna binge like I always do when I feel bad. But this light bulb went off in my head that was like, hey, you always cry after you binge. Why don't you just cry first? And I was like, okay. And so I went on my bed, and I'll never forget that day because I lay on my bed, I lay on that blanket that I had, and I cried. And then when I was done, I sat up and I was like, oh, like I don't want to binge anymore. And that was the very last day I ever binged from one meditation session. Now, I'm not just saying that anyone after one meditation session can get over their addictive
Yeah.
behavior, compulsive behavior. But what I learned that day was, oh, I have to feel. If I let myself feel, then I'm not stuck in my habit. And which ties back to again two things. Like one thing, Scott, what you were saying about not not being a victim of your emotions, one, but two, also being able to sit with. And I think with addiction, there's this feeling of I suffer so much when I'm not doing whatever it is that destructive behavior, that I'm going to do that so I don't feel. And I think we're in a society that trains us for that. It's like, oh, you don't want to feel? Just look at your phone. Oh, you don't want to feel? Like, just watch a show. You don't want to feel? Just like binge watch, doom scroll, drink, eat, whatever, porn, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It's at our fingertips. And so I think we're learning less and less just be with. But that being with is so powerful because when you feel your negative emotion, you digest it and it goes. It's like kids, I have two little ones and they get real mad, 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 and then it's over. Like a couple minutes, right? Why? The whole energy of the emotion is like coursing through their bodies like crazy, and then it's out. And and we as adults were like, I don't want to feel bad though, so I'm not gonna, But at the same time,
Yeah.
the only way out is through. Going back to what we were
Boom.
sharing earlier.
Boom.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
hope.
that's so, there's a lot there. That's so much. It's hard to face those
Yeah.
things. I really want to. That's what I'm really focused on now. Is like telling, like it's like what stuff. Some of the stuff Scott's saying is like I want to read his book. I want to know where he got there. And but one of the things that I'm noticing is like I just broke my ankle and I gained like 15 or 20 pounds. So I'm like extra chubby now, like more than my regular chubby. And but I have a friend and he's like shredded. Like every day I think he gets a new abdominal muscle. Like I don't know how it's possible. He ages and he's more beautiful and he's the nicest guy ever. But there's always this like that person has it, or that person has it, or that person has it. And it's like, okay, but what else do they have? And it's like, it's so easy to find one aspect in one person that, like, if you like, oh, look, they have that one thing and I want that one thing, but there's so much of their person. Like, Emma, I didn't really know you that well until I got close to Leslie. And I literally, and this was all post 2019. It was like, oh, Emma has problems. And then, like, when you're like, I had an eating, I'm like, what? I just thought you, like, gallop through life, like just getting A+ on everything and being like sweet and smart. And then you start talking, I'm like, oh my God, this girl has so much to say. Like, there's so much behind this. There's a reason why she's so into this. So I think that one of the, pulling back the curtain, like I was like on all these, I mean, so many of my friends are really, really successful, but it doesn't guarantee that, something you picked up in junior high or elementary or whatever from your DNA is like, you can get through it. And I think that's what the coolest thing you said, Scott, that I liked today was like, yeah, it doesn't matter how far you're down the road, you can change it, face it and change it, or accept that it's that way, because like you can't grow your arm back or something like that, like, cause some people get really upset about that when I talk to them. Or like I work with a lady who's in a wheelchair and I was like, oh, my knees are sore. She goes, oh, wouldn't that be a nice feeling? And, it's like, but it's this, beautiful. It really is, Emma, like sovereignty. Like it is doing that, but just knowing that you might take a little while to get there than other people. You might be hearing this and being like, oh, that'd be cool. But then you go back into your habit of eating 9 peanut butter and jam cookies every day. And you're like, oh, I shouldn't do that. And then you do it again. But knowing that one day you might not, and that you can change. And it's really, that's the coolest thing I think, is that deep down, most people are great people and they have so much to offer. They just have to get through all those masks and stories and start living how they want to live, but not blaming anybody else for their situation.
Yeah, or just like create like peanut butter jelly sundaes.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I do with a lot of my vices. I'm like, I leave that to Sundays, and then because I don't think like all this stuff needs to be eradicated from the kingdom. I think peanut butter jelly sandwiches are delicious. I think a full life would be one that includes peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I don't know. I think how can moderation and responsibility and living a healthy mind be the key, as opposed to telling people what to not do, what to do. I think there's too much moral policing in our world today. And that's what you're hearing from me as well. You're picking up on my reaction to how everyone is kind of looking down on everyone for their lifestyles. And but I want people to live their best self, their best life.
I love that. Thanks to both of you. And I know, Scott, you're on the clock, but I'm just so grateful you both came on. And the conversation and the points you both brought up were so beautiful and insightful and inspiring.
Thanks for bringing us together, Emma.
I know. I just knew you two would click. So I just,
Mark's amazing. Yeah, Mark is absolutely amazing, and I wish I knew his story while I was writing my book. I would have included him in my book, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But
he's in mine.
What did you say, Emma?
He's in mine.
Oh, good.
Hopefully, yeah, Scott, it was really nice to. I like the thing that I'll take away from. I do want to read your book, but I'll take away that thing and I'll mention it to people. Like, you can change, you can. That's pretty. I think that might be the most radical thing you said. Like, for people to believe that they could actually, even after 16 years, even after 17 years.
And don't be a victim to the grip of the emotion has on you in an addictive state. Like, I don't want us to be a victim to that. Does that make sense?
That's a whole other episode.
Like, really don't. Like, we can really show love to people and compassion when they're in the grips. And be like, like, show a little lightness and kindness for yourself and realize that you don't have to be a victim to that feeling. It doesn't have to last forever. Just because thing feels something now doesn't mean it has to last the same way forever.
That's beautiful, man. That's like, yeah. To live that is the most beautiful thing, because like I talked to, so there's something, like some thoughts you can't get through, some thoughts, and I'll be very honest about that. And I talk to my spiritual teacher about that every time I see him. There's like, I got 4 thoughts, and they are The other ones, whatever, come and go, come and go, come and go, whatever. And but I'm being as honest as I can be, because some of them don't go. And it's like, and I talked to my buddy, and he was married for 23 years, and he was like, I think about my ex-wife every day, and that's what he was telling me this story. And then he's like, and I shouldn't think about it. I shouldn't think about her. I shouldn't think about her. And then he said, then I woke up one day in the most peaceful state because I love her. And she's like my left hand, and I love my left hand. And then their whole relationship through their divorce changed, and they had this most amazing experience. But he was doing all this shoulds and coulds, and I shouldn't, and I shouldn't. And then he just realized, like, this is just a thought. And I have those thoughts, and I don't think this is really time or place to get into it, but to acknowledge that they're just there, they're just part of me. And they will change, and they go up and down in volume, but they're there, and I have to, like, I read, I meditate, I do all the things, but it's like some of them are there, and it's like, and they're lessons I haven't learned yet, or something, I don't know, but instead of cursing them, I welcome them now with love. And so I just want to admit that, like, I always hate listening to these things, and the people kind of come off as like they don't have issues, and I so want to admit that I have so many, and I try to work on them, but there's always thoughts that are stuck in my head that I wish they would go away, but they don't, but they're just thoughts, and they're not me.
And it's okay
Yeah.
to have thoughts. It's okay. It's okay. Give yourself permission to have the thoughts. Albert Ellis was a cheeky fellow, which is why I like him. He created, rational emotive therapy. He had a phrase called masturbation. Stop masturbating yourself all the time. Stop, saying must. You must
Oh
do
yeah,
this. You must be
beautiful.
this way. He has an article called Masturbation. Stop rubbing yourself the wrong way. Anyway.
I love that.
If you enjoyed this conversation, check out my book, Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and Chaos, which is pretty much the times we live in. And also, go ahead and subscribe and stay tuned. Every 2 weeks, we're going to release another episode. If you're interested in being on the podcast, shoot us an email. Reach out to us on my website, www.iamsov.com. And also, go ahead and do the sovereignty test that's on the website. Check it out. There's tons of resources for you. We're here to help you on your sovereignty journey. All the best.